Hey, welcome in, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's the Tuesday Texas football live stream on Texas Football, brought to you by Texas Electricity Ratings every Tuesday night. Hooking from Minneapolis already in there. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that wherever you are. I will say in Austin, Texas today, it was almost 90 degrees. Hopefully where you are, the weather has been as nice as today. It's summer-like in the ATX today, and we got you covered from all over the country. We've got a lot to do. We're 2 days post the NFL Scouting Combine. We're 13 days to the Longhorn Pro Day down at the 40 acres. That will launch spring practice, which we are now 2 weeks away, 14 days from today. Longhorns will begin and come off a spring break and begin their workouts towards the orange-white scrimmage on April the 20th. So a lot to talk about. Progress through the winter workouts. CJ's got some inside scoop on early enrollees that are impressing so far. Rod had a conversation here recently on Texas Football with one of the top defensive backs coming in for the Longhorns in this class of 2024, Santana Wilson. So we'll get some thoughts on that. And obviously, all eyes on the NFL draft in late April after the Longhorns orange and white scrimmage. We'll talk about Longhorns draft prospects. And guys, it's good to see you, Rod and CJ. Watching some Longhorn baseball. It's the Aggies and Longhorns from a jam-packed Disch-Falk field. Aggies up 2-0 early. Braden Montgomery, the Stanford transfer, has already hit a 2-run homer in the first inning, but going to be a good ball game over at UFC Disch-Falk Field tonight. The Aggies and Horns in their final non-conference matchup ever, right? Next year they'll be in conference play. Right now it's a Big 12 team versus an SEC team, but it's 2-0 A&M. By the way, if you haven't been paying attention, A&M up to an 11-0 start to the year.
Yes, they are.
And they've outscored their opponents 116-18 so far. I mean, they're blowing people out on the nightly. So far they're off to a 2-0 start against the Longhorns. Coach Jim Schlossnagel's team, very good. David Pierce's team comes in at 7-4. So we'll keep an eye on that game. We'll talk plenty of football. Gentlemen, how are we? Rod, how was your conversation with Santana Wilson, one of the top-rated defensive players out of the state of Arizona, son of Adrian Wilson, the great NFL player in his day? How did that go? What were your takeaways from that conversation that you can hear, of course, and go back and watch on Texas Football?
Yeah, you can go check it out right now. I retweeted the link to it. My man Jerry Hamilton tweeted it out initially, but love the conversation I had with Sam. I mean, I watched a lot of film on Santana Wilson, and I went to ask him, how often do you play bump and run? Because every highlight I see, the young man, he's playing bump and run coverage, press coverage. I think he told me like 90-something% of the time he's playing press coverage, and that aligns with what I think Steve Sarkisian and his defensive staff, what they ideally want to be. They want to be a team that can play press man on both the boundary side and the field side. Remember, toward the end of the season, in that Tech game and that Oklahoma State game and the Big 12 title game, Texas played more press man on the boundary and the field side than they had played all season long. So I guess as maybe they liked the matchup against those receivers. They felt like they could win, or maybe it's because, they felt like later on in the season, these guys had more experience. Maybe they were more fundamentally sound. Maybe their technique, was a little bit better toward the end of the season after they had worked it and cultivated and been able to really kind of craft that whatever their press technique is going to be. I think that's where they want to be. And I think they're recruiting more athletes that are capable of that, like a guy like Santana Wilson, who prefers to play press. His technique is going to be, I'm going to say flawless, but his technique is going to be on point because he comes from a household where his dad played the defensive back position. So, his footwork's going to be real good. His technique is going to be real good. And the mindset, right? It's a guy that likes to challenge receivers at the line of scrimmage. That's what I found out about talking to him. He likes to challenge, and he likes a variety of different techniques at the line of scrimmage. That's what I found out from him too. Some corners, they want to play the same technique on every play, and they would like to replicate it. All right, to be as close to the previous rep as possible. They don't want to change. They don't want a lot of variety in the way they play press man. But what I found out about Santana Wilson, I'm sure he got this from his dad, was that he has a lot of different. He got a lot of different ways to play press in his repertoire. He's got a lot of digs. Sometimes he'll rush a guy. Sometimes, he'll try to get the two-hand press on the guy. Sometimes he'll shuffle out. Sometimes it's a check step. Sometimes he's trying to shadow the wide receiver. I like the fact that he's got a lot of different techniques in his bag already. You don't see that from young corners. Usually a young corner, he plays press one kind of way, and usually it's the wrong kind of way. You can see the raw material. You can see he's got good footwork. You probably can see, oh, man, this guy's got good speed. He's got good hip flexibility, loose hips, which is something that you'll hear people talk about with corners. He's got all those things, but what I love about him is that you can tell he's a thinking man's corner. He's going up to the line of scrimmage thinking about the rep and thinking about the technique and probably based on the matchup of the receiver and the stature of the receiver, the frame of the receiver, he's changing up his technique based on the different matchups that he's getting from week to week. So I thought he's a young corner, obviously, but mature beyond his years. That makes sense. He's an old soul coming from a household where his dad played in the NFL. Anytime you have a household where a dad, brother, hell, mom played a sports at a really high level at the collegiate level and then played pro, I call them old souls because they grow up kind of knowing the commitment, the dedication it takes, knowing the work ethic that it takes, knowing that getting the knowledge overall, the knowledge of the game or whatever that sport may be. Those guys are ahead of it. They're much more mature beyond their years, and I think he's one of those guys.
Yeah, they're not in awe of it, CJ, right? They just they've seen it. That's how they've grown up. A lot of folks when they get to UT and it's the first time they're in a big stadium, the first time they've been around, big time college or pro football. Santana Wilson grew up in the house and grew up going to games and in locker rooms, and it does advance you. And obviously, defensive secondary is the biggest area of improvement. We know the defensive team in 2024 is going to be looking for help on the interior D line, but should be a faster team, should be a better coverage team, and should be a team that protects the edges better as they begin spring practice in 2 weeks, starting to work towards that with PK.
Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, a lot of discussion right now on that defensive line. You can expect a lot more impact on the exterior, but where does that run stopping ability come on the interior? And right now you've added Savea out of Arizona. You're expecting a lot of jump in production and improvement in snap count, all that goes through it with Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. But you're going to have to figure out who are those 4 and 5 and 6 guys in the rotation. And right now, that's probably the biggest question mark on the team. Do you trust Aaron Bryan enough? Is Alex January physically ready to jump in? What about Dre Bledsoe? Has he gained 20, 25 pounds that you expected to from a year ago, which really hindered his ability to be on the field throughout the season? So there's a lot of question marks right now, and this spring is going to be big. I mean, Texas needs Xavier Mitchell, who I didn't mention just now, to be that guy that takes that next step into the rotation. No one else on this team fits that 350-pound mold that we see with Xavier Mitchell, and there was a reason why we saw Ryan Day and Kirby Smart battling to the whistle for his signature during his recruitment. So a lot going on with the Texas defensive line right now, and I mean, there's a lot of activity today on the recruiting trail as well with Kenny Baker going out of state for a number of offers. But his attention is going to have to be focused and it's going to have to be razor sharp by the time spring ball kicks off in 2 weeks, because that's a position that cannot be weak and behind a number of others when it comes to the SEC play.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think we all expect them to be faster, as I mentioned, better in coverage with more coverage specialists, as Rod calls them. But yeah, I mean, if you can't, the irony of it, their run defense was so great this year. But Rod, you just glance at the schedule, right? You got Michigan, you got Georgia, you got Kentucky, you got A&M. I mean, you got teams that want to line up and pound you and smash you in the face in the SEC. And last year's team was ready to handle that. That's the big question: is this year's team going to be ready to handle a pounding running game like that?
Exactly. I mean, this is what's happening in the NFL too. I mean, it's not that different. Right? The defenders in the NFL, even at the combine, right, they're getting lighter and they're getting faster. But that opens up an opportunity for the offensive counter, which is, let's go power football. These guys are faster on defense. They can run sideline to sideline, but they're lighter usually. So you start to see more and more teams go with power football, old school power football. This is why Jim Harbaugh is going to the NFL going, excellent, right? He's excited about going to the NFL. He's like, oh, power, Jim Harbaugh brand of football in this league, all right, where it's essentially now, you're talking about hybrid athletes on defense. We're talking about hybrid defenses. You're talking about defense that are multiple, and all those things are great and matching up with passing offenses. But when you're going up against an old school power run game where they want to run power on you, downhill run game, you better have some run stuffers. You better have some serious run stoppers in that interior, right? The central nervous system of your defense. That's what CJ's talking about. That's the concern for Texas, because even at that other linebacker spot, we're not sure who's going to occupy that opposite Anthony Hill. And then you lost the best D-tackle duo in college football, one of the best in the history of Texas football. And that is the concern. So, yes, you're going to be light and you're going to be much faster defensively on the perimeter, on the edges, right? Kind of this defense feels constructed from the outside in. I think the secondary is going to be a strength this year. Makuba, Jadae Barron coming back. You got, your corners, Terrence Brooks, Malik Muhammad, those guys coming back. So the secondary should be a strength. The young Derek Williams should take a huge leap this year. So I think, honestly, secondary, that's my prediction, it's going to be a strength for them this year. You're right. The vulnerability that Texas could be exposed with is the power running game. And we see that, like I said, you see it in the NFL too. Look at them Dallas Cowboys, right? They couldn't find linebackers, couldn't stop the power run game all season long. Where you were talking about against the Bills, you was talking about against the Cardinals, of course, talking against the Packers in the playoffs, because that is a defense built on hybridism, is built on multiplicity, right? And it's built on speed. All great things for Dan Quinn. You force a lot of turnovers, you get your hands on a lot of balls, and that's great when you're playing passing offense. But when a team decides to hell with passing, let's see if they can just stop the run. Can they stop the run? Now, Texas this year was great at stopping the run, but they did not have the coverage specialists, and they didn't have the coverage, right? And that's something that hasn't improved for Texas this entire time Sark has been here. Every other position group has gotten better, have taken exponential leaps in improvement, right? D-line, linebacker. We're talking about sending guys to the NFL type of improvement, right? Yep. Same thing true on the offensive side of the ball. O-line, running back, wide receiver, you name the quarterback, everything has gotten better on the 4 acres. The secondary has not gotten better. I'm not saying that they've been atrocious and terrible. No. They have not gotten better. You cannot tell me, and you cannot give me the stats, and you cannot give me the metrics that tell me that secondary has improved from year 1 with Sark to year 3 with Sark. This is a big year. It's a big year for Terry Joseph, big year for Blake Gideon, because there really is no reason for that secondary not to be a strength this season. You got a lot of veterans coming back. These guys have played a lot of football. If these guys are still being exposed and coverage is still a weakness, I think then we're going to start looking at potentially the coaches and the production and the development, right? Texas is being praised right now for their development at the combine. People are saying, man, Texas hadn't developed talent like this in 15, 20 years, in a long time. So you're seeing Texas developing talent this well. And they're right about that. But I think it comes down to, honestly, for Texas, can they, in the secondary, can these guys lock in on coverage, and can they do it consistently? I think they can. If they can't, I think Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon will have a lot of questions to answer at the end of the season. There's a reason that they didn't get the extension that a lot of the other coaches got. All right. They're still on that 1-year deal. I think Sark wants to see if they improve. If not, I think he wants to give himself a little flexibility to upgrade if he needs to. And I respect that about Sark too. I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, show me. I mean, everybody else is developing. It's a great point. It might have been talent, might have been the players they had, but at the same time, and they've addressed that through the talent acquisition, as the guys you mentioned, and the recruiting high school and portal. CJ, you mentioned Kenny Baker on the recruiting trail. Obviously, when they get to spring practice in 2 weeks from tonight or today, you'll start to evaluate that. Pick the audience up on and the viewers up on the out-of-state offers that are going on right now, and obviously, if they get through the spring and realize, man, we're going to be, playing the schedule I just mentioned, we may need another guy or two in the portal. Safe to say that's not out of the question either on the defensive front.
Yeah, we'll start with the new offers. There were 4 defensive line offers extended this afternoon. The first going to Chase Sims out of Randall High School in Richmond, Texas. He's a guy that Texas is familiar with. Kenny Baker actually made a stop to him one of his first days after getting the job. Chase Sims is an interesting prospect, 6'2", 305, threw a 47-foot shot put. So he's got a lot of explosion right there in his lower body, and obviously the strength to throw that 47 feet, pretty remarkable. And then there was 3 out of state, 2 in Florida and 1 in Tennessee. So we're talking a little bit more about Texas branching out when it comes to the deep South SEC territory, as we've been kind of harping on over the last couple of weeks. Jarquez Carter out of Newberry, Florida, has 31 offers, about 6'2". Texas got in with them earlier today. Actually close with Jarrett Gibson as well, so something to monitor there. Also in Florida, out of Port Orange, Florida, is Derry Norris Jr. He 40-plus offers, has 4 official visits locked in right now: Georgia Tech, NC State, Minnesota, and Purdue. He's an interesting one. He actually reported that it was a call that Tashard Choice and Kenny Baker were on together with to extend the offer to him from Texas. So a little bit interesting there. Always, we've talked about Tashard Choice's involvement in Georgia. He was busy going down to see Brandon Brown, earlier this winter as well, out in Ugali, Florida as well. So something to keep an eye on. And then out of Tennessee, Steven Shivers out of Humboldt, Tennessee. This is a bigger kid, about 6'5", 320. So you really talk about the mass in the interior. Coach Baker's really starting to look at guys that can fill that role that we've seen from Tavondre Sweat and eventual Sadir Mitchell, et cetera. There's a lot of movement right there. And now to the official visit window, Andrew Marsh, the talented wide receiver out of Katy, Jordan, scheduled and then locked in an official visit just now, June 14th through 16th. So another name on the wide receiving front to keep an eye on that is coming in June. It should be, again, those last 2 weekends in June are going to be very busy, and we're getting one more big name coming in for June 14th through 16th with Andrew Marsh.
Good stuff right there. And then obviously we'll see how spring goes, spring game, and then, could there be some attacking of some positions, including defensive tackle, on the transfer market come spring when the 15-day window opens after spring practices. Guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the big topic of the morning and the day was Arch Manning opting out of the video game. I know it's been talked about. It's amazing to me. I mean, I saw it and wasn't shocked. I know we've talked about Archie Manning saying Quinn's, Arch isn't going to take any, NIL money until he's a starting quarterback. Whether it's $600 in a video game, it's just not part of the plan for the Mannings until he's actually a starter. CJ, you're a big fan of the video game and EA Sports and all that. What was your original take? And Rod, you too.
Yeah, well, first off, I should say I'm not surprised that this blew up into such a big story because it is Arch Manning and it is the University of Texas quarterbacks. Feels like anytime the two are linked together, the story is going to blow up. I mean, first, if this is what Arch Manning's putting his foot down on in terms of not taking NIL money until he has the job, tip of the cap. I mean, if you're sticking to that, I love it. And I understand why it's a big deal because, again, it is Arch Manning and it is Texas. But no one should actually be upset about this. No one should actually be mad. No one should actually really care. The video game's still going to come out. There's still going to be 10,000 other players with their names in the game that will give you the real-life look that we see on a Saturday-to-Saturday basis when watching college football. Again, it's only a story because it is Arch Manning and because it's the University of Texas. If that's what he set himself out to do, and it is what the Manning family wants for Arch to say, I don't want NIL money until I am the starting quarterback, what's the issue? And again, all the stories and all the headlines about going to Texas and making more money than Brock Purdy, that's not the case. And so, I'm with Arch here. I mean, who cares? No one should be really upset about this. It's his decision. It's his life. He doesn't want to be a part of it. I mean, that's it.
No, I agree. First of all, I agree with you. I don't even play the game, so I'm not even that emotionally invested. But I will say this, devil's advocate, he could have just given the money to charity like he did for the Panini deal.
Yeah.
So you ain't got to take the money. All right. If you don't want to take the money till you're a starter, you ain't got to take it. You already have provided, a kind of a charitable element to your NIL, ventures when he did with the Panini deal. So you can just, negotiate a deal because I'm sure they approached him about negotiating a side deal, right? Quinn Ewers got a side deal, which was, I'm sure, more money than the $600 that all the other players are getting when they opt in a free video game. So the best players around the country, most recognizable names, they are getting side deals. We don't know how much that is. That has not been reported. I don't know if it will be reported, but they did report, we're making sure for the credibility of the game that we're going to go out there and we're going to get the best players and the most recognizable players from every team. And honestly, the fact that Arch even got the, I'm sure even approached, not like I said, for a side deal means that he's still one of those big names. I went and looked at On3's overall. This is valuation. This is not how much they're making. This is how much they're valued at in the NIL world, right? Bronny James is the top college athlete in terms of NIL valuation. He's at $5 million. They're saying his brand in the NIL world is worth $5 million. They say Shadur Sanders is second. He's at 4.7. Livy Dunn, the LSU gymnast, she's third. She's at 3.5. Caitlin Clark, of course, the phenomenon, Caitlin Clark, right? The most popular athlete potentially in college sports right now, around 3.1 million. First of all, think about the commonalities right here. Nepo babies at the top. Bronny James, and of course Shadur Sanders. So we already know their brand. Same thing with Arch Manning. We already know the brand. First family of football. All right. Also think about the rest of these people that are ranked ahead of Arch Manning, who's the fifth highest on the list, by the way, at 2.8 million valuation. They've played. They're competing. That all Arch played was a couple of series. That's it. So I think you can realistically make the leap. I don't think it's mental gymnastics that when he is the starting quarterback in 2025, projected to be, that he'll be the most, if not one of the most popular players in college football, in all of college sports, period. Right? Because we're looking at right now, guy ain't even played, and he's already got the 5th most valuable in terms of valuation of the NIL. So when there's no Shadir Sanders and no Bronny James, he's going to skyrocket to the top of the list as soon as he becomes a starter. So to me, I think it does align with their values that they don't want to take NIL money until he's a starter, and I get that. But I do think this is a long play holdout for the Mannings. I think it's a long play holdout, and they understand when he is the projected starter. And by the way, when he's the projected starter, his second year, I almost guarantee you, if he has a decent year, his first year as a starter, he's going to be on the cover his second year, period.
Yeah. Oh,
and that's something else to negotiate, right? That's something else we need to negotiate. I'm going to be on the cover. We got to negotiate a different kind of deal. All right. So I just think, listen, I'm sure there is part of that. He wants to focus on football. Big part of it is their values are, we don't want him getting NIL until he starts. That's all great. I also think there's a business side to this. And I think it is essentially a negotiation. It is a holdout. It also, like I said, it fits with what they want to do. But I think when he projects to be a starter in 2025, that's when they're going to negotiate the biggest, the most unprecedented side deal for the NIL that we've ever seen. And it's not going to be reported. We won't know what it is, but I think it will be the most lucrative we've ever seen. And I think in his second year as a starter, he'll be on the cover because EA Sports wants that, right? College football wants that. It's the first family of football. Everybody wants to talk about the Mannings. So I think this season there was more downside to him being on the game than upside. Like, what's his rating going to be? That's going to be controversial. It's going to be if he's a low rating, everybody's going to be like, oh man, it's a low rating for Arch Manning. If it's a high rating close to Quinn Ewers, everybody's going to bench Quinn Ewers and then put in Arch Manning. Everybody's going to put Arch Manning in the transfer portal, post that stuff on social media, and be like, hey, now Arch Manning is playing for LSU. Told y'all he was going to transfer. There's just, and that, by the way, that won't affect Texas football at all, but it will contribute to the nuisance of a narrative, right, about Arch Manning and about Quinn Ewers. So I think ultimately they figured out, this is more downside than upside for us being in the game this year. He's not even started, but when he does start, this is a great tactic to gain and maximize leverage, ladies and gentlemen. It's just straight business.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the Mannings are great at it, no doubt about it.
They are.
Whether you're Archie or Cooper or certainly Peyton and Eli, Omaha Productions and all the things that surround that.
Yep.
By the way, just watching this baseball game, it's still 2-0 Aggies. I just saw Coach Sark's up in the Brown distributing booth there, the box with Dan Brown hanging out with the Bud Light folks.
Nice.
You can see Sark at the ball game tonight talking to Dan Brown. Dan Brown from Brown Distributing, one of the biggest baseball fans you'll ever be around. Spent some time with him at spring training a couple times. He is a great, great guy.
Nice.
And of course, they had his name is on the press box and the facilities there. Dan Brown from Brown Distributing. Good to see Sark out at the ball game tonight. Hey guys, is it fair to say, based on what you guys just talked about with Arch, and is it even debatable that Quinn Ewers has more pressure on him than any college football player in 2024? I mean, the spotlight of performing, the expectations are going to be through the roof. Texas will be top 2 or 3 in the country, coming off what we just saw at the combine and the draft, which we'll talk about here coming up on the Tuesday Texas live stream. But, Quinn Ewers has a lot of pressure to perform. I mean, because to live up to the expectation, knowing that Arch Manning's right behind you and everything he does is under a microscope. Quinn Ewers, is it even close to someone who has as much pressure? Because last year, to me, I mean, the pressure was on Jim Harbaugh to deliver a national championship, right? And he did at the coaching level. We've seen the coaches, Kirby Smart, could he finally get over the hump? He did. But as far as players, I mean, I guess you could say Shadir Sanders could potentially, but I mean, Quinn Ewers has so much pressure to perform at a high level and take Texas to that next level.
Yeah, there's only 2 guys that really came to mind initially. This is a great question because, I mean, Quinn and what Texas is walking into in the SEC and what they just accomplished in 2023 to maintain that level of play is going to fall solely on the shoulders of Quinn Ewers. Regarding what Texas lost, their production on the defensive side of the ball, in the interior, a lot of pieces going in the NFL, a lot of pieces added, but to maintain that level of play, it's all going to be on Quinn Ewers walking into the SEC and showing again that he can play football. If you look at Twitter after the combine, there's a lot of conversation about who the biggest loser of the combine was, and it was Quinn Ewers. That was a narrative that was going on while the combine was happening because of the days that A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy had in Indianapolis. And I will defend Quinn Ewers here because I thought he had a pretty good year. You can nitpick in the red zone. You can nitpick the self-sacks. But, hey, there's no more excuses now. You've revamped that wide receiving room. You had 2 first-round running or wide receivers this past year. There cannot be any more excuses for you in terms of growth and learning phases. It's all on you now. You're a third-year starter in your 4th year of college football. You need to go out and perform that way, especially as one of the highest-rated players to ever exist in high school recruiting. That's Quinn Ewers this year. So the only other 2 names that came to my mind were Carson Beck, who did lead Georgia to a 12-0 record going into the SEC championship, lost by a score. He's a guy that, again, we're looking at Georgia right now as a team that is going to be up in the SEC rankings to begin and carry over into the year. The other one is Will Howard at Ohio State.
Oh, wow.
And I say this because if you look at Ohio State and that roster that they have, there's not a roster in college football right now that stacks up with what Ohio State has from their starting 22. And from him to make that jump from Kansas State to Ohio State with guys like Aaron Noland and Devin Brown and all, I think they have 4 or 5 guys, Julian Sain in that group as well. I mean, that is 4 or 5 starting quarterbacks in one room right now at Ohio State who doesn't like losing and is going to be walking into Michigan looking like if we don't win this year against Michigan in the program, basically. Ryan Day is going to be gone. That staff is going to have complete turnover, and everybody on that roster that has NFL draft aspirations are going to be heading to the draft. You saw JTT, Caleb Downs, all these guys join and stay at Ohio State to beat Michigan, to win a Big Ten title, and to go to the playoff. If Will Howard can't do that, and if Ryan Day can't do that this year for Ohio State, it's going to be ugly in Columbus.
Yeah, you're right. It is right. I think you're right, CJ. It's Ryan Day. It's Ryan Day. Right now, Ryan Day can't beat Michigan. First of all, he couldn't beat them after, the sign stealing scandal, because apparently that was the big advantage for Jim Harbaugh. That's the only reason that he got the leg up, right? An advantage over Ohio State was because he had to cheat to do it. Well, he proved that now I don't need to cheat to do it. I can just whip you. That's what Michigan football does to Ohio State. Then on the flip side, now you got the entire staff pretty much overhauled in Michigan. Jim Harbaugh's gone. You had 18 guys at the combine, all that talent gone. And then now Ryan Day adding talent, right? He's adding Chip Kelly to the coaching staff to call the plays. If you can't beat Michigan this year without Jim Harbaugh, the ghosts that are going to start haunting Ryan Day and that program. I agree with CJ, man. It's going to get ugly. So I think the Quinn thing is second with Arch, kind of hovering behind him. But I think Ryan Day's got more pressure than any human being in college football right now. Not only do you need to win the Big Ten, you got to beat Michigan. And then after you beat Michigan, you got to go far in the playoff. You can't, if you end up beating Michigan, everybody's going to expect you to get to the championship game or get to the semifinals of that 12-team playoff. So it's going to be interesting to see how Ohio State responds.
Great.
Yeah, Rod, if you beat Michigan, now you got to go beat Oregon, too.
Exactly.
There's another team there. It's not just going to be playing Michigan State or Wisconsin in that Big Ten title game.
Yeah, with the new Big Ten schools. I mean, I think Ryan Day's record in his last 43 Big Ten games is 40-3. The 3 losses are to Michigan, right? Knowing Columbus, if they beat Michigan, the pressure will be down a little. But yes, then they need to make a run, and Chip Kelly's there, and they're talented. So coach is Ryan Day, without a doubt. Player, I think, is Quinn. He's got to perform. And look, last year Quinn Ewers played pretty damn well, right? The 2 losses came to 60-year quarterbacks and Dylan Gabriel and Michael Penix. They went to the last play. Defense, I mean, Quinn Ewers gave you the lead against Oklahoma, had a chance against Washington. We know it didn't work out, but those were 60-year quarterbacks, and that your leaky secondary could be blamed as much as anything in the Oklahoma and Washington games, as much more than Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers beat Alabama at Alabama, won the Big 12 championship. There's a lot to build on, but again, this Quinn Ewers, watching Arch Manning story blow up around a video game just reminds you that, if he plays poorly against Michigan in Ann Arbor on September 7th, there's just going to be a lot of folks saying, "Oh man, what about Arch? What about Arch?" Or even if they're going to be favored in that game. But that's why I talk about pressure on a player. He's got to perform. He's got to play well. And Michigan had the number 1 defense in the country last year. I know it's a lot of new players and a new defensive coordinator, but that's what I'm saying with Quinn. If he stumbles early, there'll be calls for, and whether, I'm not saying Sark's going to, bow to the pressure or succumb to it, just the pressure of living up to what the expectations would be. Because let's be honest, last year the Longhorns were ranked when the season began. There was hope they could have a real good season and a step forward. Well, it's changed now. The whole "we're back" narrative, with this draft and what's coming from the combine, it's pretty safe to say Texas is back. They're going to be preseason top 3. Now you got to live up to that. And the quarterback's going to have a lot on his shoulders to perform. And so Sark, obviously, to perform well in that environment. All right, guys, good stuff right there. We're keeping an eye on the Texas baseball game. It's 2-0 still. One thing I would say, Tanner Witt is through three solid, actually 4 innings now. Actually, Tanner Witt out. Luke Harrison has come in, took him out, one out into the 4th inning. So Tanner Witt did look pretty good. Did give up the home run to Braden Montgomery. That's one of the best hitters in all of college baseball, but pitched pretty well. And that's encouraging because you really need Tanner Witt to come along here, coming off that Tommy John surgery behind LeBaron Johnson Jr., getting started on a Tuesday night against one of the best teams in college baseball with the Aggies. All right, now, I know, CJ, you've been on a deep dive into the NFL draft. And as we talk about the combine and coming off of it, I saw where Lance Zierlein, NFL Network out of Houston, his father was the offensive line coach in the NFL for a long, long time. He does a great job. And he has come out with his mock draft 2.0. In it, 3 Longhorns go in the first round. Byron Murphy, A.D. Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy in the back end to the Chiefs, which is going to scare everybody in the NFL if that happens, to give give Xavier Worthy to Patrick Mahomes. But you were doing some deep dives on 3 players from one school drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, which very well could happen coming up in the late last weekend of April. What did you uncover when your eyes blurring and going crossways, looking at all these numbers? What were you able to glean from first-round draft success for programs around the country in the last several decades?
Yeah, every now and then I go full Bugs Bunny and I get the carrots and I get the nice little living room down in a nice hole somewhere and I just dive in. And wherever the rabbit hole takes me is where I end up for a day, a night, 2 days, however long it takes me. Today it started probably around 10 in the morning when I saw, Texas was projected to have 3 first-round picks in the NFL draft this year. Byron Murphy, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Got me thinking a little bit. Something I don't do very often, but today I was thinking. And the last time Texas had 3 first-round picks was 1980. And that was Lamb Jones, Johnny Johnson, and Derek Hatchett for
DBU, baby. DBU.
That was your birth year, Rob.
They know the names.
Your birth year.
Yeah, that was my birth year, and that was DBU representing. It ain't no coincidence, man. For real. I like that.
Well, that was the last time, and it really got me thinking. 3, we've seen the draft success recently with the Georgias, the Alabamas, Ohio States. They are regularly hearing multiple guys, called in the first round. So I really got going, and I went through every Power 5 team in the major 4 conferences plus Notre Dame to see which teams had the most 3+ round players drafted in the first round, going back through all of college football. And again, Texas only having 1 was rather surprising to me because there are, let's count them up right quick, 16 schools with more than 1 draft class of 3+ players picked in the first round. Ohio State has 12. Alabama has 3 such classes. Both of them have loaded up recently in the last decade of those classes, but also 2023, they each had a trio selected as well. It really got me thinking, man. And, there's a couple surprises here. Oregon, 0. They've never had 3+ players drafted in a first round in NFL draft. Auburn's only had 1. Oklahoma has 4. Texas A&M has 2. So, I was really, really going to think, this could be the year that Texas starts that first round trend in which we see a lot of guys taken early in the NFL draft. We started a little bit last year with Bijan Robinson going 7. But if you can start building on that and now use that as a recruiting tool that we can develop, we can put you in the NFL, and you can win football games. Again, Rod, what do we say? When Texas starts rolling, you can't negatively recruit against this university, and this is the next step of getting the guys into the NFL early rather than just somewhere in the 4th or the 5th or the 7th, whatever it might be. If you can break this trend and get guys into the league, things can really, really open up, not only for high school recruiting, but the portal as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that even when Texas was rolling during those Mac Brown years, right, when Mac was at his apex pretty much, they were winning double-digit games, and they were sending guys to the league, competing for championships. They didn't put 3 guys in the first round in those years. That's pretty – it just shows you how tough it is to do.
They had 3 straight years of 2 in the league, and that's, with Huff, Griffin, VY at the time. They, that little run right there, but they weren't able to eclipse 3, and I think that's what separates a really, really good team. Obviously, they won a national championship, but to that level of now that we're seeing right now where it feels like only 4 or 5 teams in college football have that real chance, that's where all the talent is. This is where Texas has to get to in my eyes.
Well, I think it also helped. The transfer portal and NIL also help, right? Because that's where you get AD Mitchell from, right? Be one of those guys you got via the transfer. So I think that helps a little bit, but that's mind blowing. Good stuff there, CJ. I can't wait to read the article, man. That's really good.
Yep, 100%, and that'll be coming out on Texas Football and on CJ's Twitter coming up. Here we go with a question: 2025 draft. Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, and Trey Moore if he kills. Maybe offer college if he makes that leap. And this is a fun conversation, guys, because if you get 3 this year, could you get 3 or 4 next year? And there's a chance if talk about the pressure on Quinn Ewers, maybe more than any in the college football. If he performs this next year, he's going to be maybe 1-1, maybe up there 1-2, 1-3 as far as quarterbacks. And Kelvin Banks, having started since a freshman, he's a can't miss tackle prospect for sure. Trey Moore is a good name as well. The kid Isaiah Bond from Alabama would be named to watch in the draft next year because of his just flat out speed, like X-Man that we just saw. And then, any other guys that you're looking at for 2024 or 2025 draft, or is that your group?
And that's the first round.
About right.
Yeah,
that feels about right. I'd put Bond right on that edge, depending on the production that he has, building off of a 650, 700-yard season at Alabama, moving into that kind of Xavier-worthy role that we saw at Texas. If he's able to put up big numbers, kind of a 1,000, 1,100-yard year with Quinn Ewers, multiple touchdowns, that speed, again, we've talked about it over and over since the combine occurred. Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell set that precedent of Texas wide receivers, right? If Isaiah Bond can put together a good year, his track times are going to be able to carry him up and above into that first round next year. But it all depends on the production the year that he puts on film, because Kelvin Banks and Quinn Ewers right now are going to be mocked way too early to go in that first round, with Quinn maybe going right into that top 5 area right now.
Yeah, I trust Sark when it comes to wide receivers, right? I mean, he's starting now to get a reputation. He has a type of wide receiver that he likes. He likes the slight frame guys who are speed demons. All the guys he's brought in pretty much are like that. Isaiah Bond's got that kind of body. Silas Bowden's got that kind of body. Actually, Matthew Golden's kind of the thicker of all those guys. Yeah. I trust Sark when it comes to wide receiver evaluation. And we know he likes speed. Hell, the 2 fastest guys in the history of the NFL Combine were Sark receivers. That is not a coincidence. All right? The man's got a type that he likes. So I trust him in that regard. It's interesting because a lot of the guys at the Combine, and I love the stuff that my man Corey Mose did over at KView. He had great content from the Combine. He was asking all the guys, who should we look out for next year? Who's going to be the breakout candidate next year? I got to say at least 3 guys, whether it's JT Sanders, Jonathan Brooks, Xavier Worthy, man, who else was up there? I think Savondre Sweat as well. They all brought up Jonte Cook. A lot of talk about Jonte Cook, man. They were really excited about Jonte Cook. Now, I know they probably haven't got a chance to spend a lot of time with the new receivers, Isaiah Bond and those guys, because they were leaving, doing stuff. They probably haven't even met those guys before. So I'll grant you that. So it's nothing against Isaiah Bond, but they were highly complimentary of Jonte Cook. And I do wonder, we had this conversation about who's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Texas. The assumption is it's going to be Isaiah Bond. He just fits, he's fast. He's already been a proven commodity. It seems like it makes sense, but don't discount Jonte Cook. He's got familiarity with the offense. He and Quinn Ewers already have chemistry. That's going to be on Quinn. It's going to be a big factor in Quinn's success, guys. It's chemistry with these receivers. They're all brand new, and it's going to be up to Quinn putting in the work in the offseason, getting the timing down for the receivers, letting them know exactly how he likes his routes, what the checks and what the sight adjustments are going to be within the offense. Make sure those guys know the offense in and out. They basically need to be having their own little study groups every damn day out on the field, getting on the practice fields, throwing 7-on-7, whatever it may be, to make sure they have that chemistry. That's the only thing I think that can hold Quinn back, is that he doesn't have the chemistry that he had with an Xavier Worthy, because they had been with those guys for a while. And I would say him and A.D. Mitchell, they did seem to have natural chemistry with them. But I do think it's going to be important with so many new wide receivers and so many unproven commodities that Quinn puts in the work in the offseason. I know he will, but I'm just saying that's going to be a huge factor. Don't discount Jonte Cook, man. Those guys, they're talking about Jonte Cook for a reason. They watch practice every day. They're in practice. They know what he's doing behind the scenes. They know how much the coaches like him. I just think, Jonte Cook might not be getting enough respect when it comes to our conversation about who's going to be getting the most targets next year in that wide receiver room.
Yeah. Agreed. Because we think about the fancy new toys coming in, right, from Alabama and Oregon and Houston. Jonte Cook was a 5-star player, right, and a high 5-star player out of DeSoto that can really run. Anthony Hill's name was mentioned in that Corey Mose coverage too, as the guy to watch on defense. And there's a lot of folks that think that if they can be solid everywhere, Anthony Hill can be a guy that roams around and just wreaks havoc on offenses. Both of those guys project as high picks when they get to their draft opportunity. Hey, Rod B, I wanted to ask you about A.D. Mitchell's combine because do we think I think we were all kind of blown away by the freak athlete that he showed to be. We saw him produce at Texas and Georgia, but I saw where the what's the service, the relative athletic score, the RAS score that they do, that A.D. Mitchell with his workout. I mean, everybody's going to talk about the 4.35, but the whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, he was one of the top, most freaky athletic receivers in the last 25 years. What he did with the broad jump and the high jump, with his vertical leap and the quick stuff. I mean, is he now? I mean, because I know we know what's at the top of the draft with Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, and they all blew it up when they will at their pro day. But is A.D. Mitchell now projected as a wide receiver one in the NFL, of the guy who can be your go-to wide receiver in the National Football League, even if he gets drafted in the 20s? He looks to me like a guy that could be a wide receiver one. Yeah,
and I think it's his size, right? We were debating whether he was going to hit the 4.4 range. This guy runs mid 4.3s, and he does it, at right under 6.3s at 6.2. But you look at the weight that he was at 205 when he ran at 4.34. I mean, guys, think about it. When John Ross ran his 4.22, he was 23 pounds heavier than Xavier Worthy. Hell, Brian Thomas, the LSU wide receiver, ran a 4.33 at 209 pounds. And A.D. Mitchell ran a 4.34 at 205 pounds, had the best broad jump of all the wide receivers. So, he's explosive too. So that's that RAS score you're talking about. It does account for the weight, the height, wingspan, like all of that different stuff. It throws all that stuff into like a cumulative index and to give you kind of the overall athletic score. I saw my man Warren Sharp tweet out a great tweet. I know CJ saw it too, that only 2 wide receivers since 2015 have run a 4.35 or faster in the 40 at the combine, measured at least 6'2" inches tall, and had a weight of at least 205 pounds. It was DK Metcalf and A.D. Mitchell. Right? Yeah. That is really good company to be in, right? That's freakish company to be in. So, I think right now he is projected. I think he was considered the 7th best wide receiver. I think now he's in the top 5, in my opinion, of the best wide receivers coming out. And the top 3 are already, that's done. They're going to be taken in the top 10 where you're talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. That's set. Those guys will be top 12 picks. When they're off the board, it's going to be interesting to see if there's another run on wide receivers or when there's another run on wide receivers. And Matt Miller says he thinks there's going to be 8 wide receivers taken in the first round. 8. That's crazy. That would set a record, by the way. I think the record is set. 8 wide receivers in the first round. That's absurd. But when you watch the combine and you watch how many receivers ran under 4.4, you had 9 receivers run under 4.4. It was the fastest wide receiver combine in the history of the combine. The average 40 was a 4.4. And A.D. Mitchell was the 3rd fastest among that group. So, Aaron, you're right, man. He projects, I think, to be a number 1 wide receiver in the league. And a lot of this is based on the CJ. And I've talked about this, and CJ's made some good points about it too. So much of your fate in the NFL is tied to where you land. Xavier Worthy lands with Patrick Mahomes. Hell, man, who knows? And Andy Reid. We be talking about that guy having a start to a Hall of Fame career potentially. But if he lands with the Panthers, then it's like, well, he's screwed. You know what I mean? He's got to try to figure it out for his second contract. Same thing with A.D. Mitchell. If A.D. Mitchell lands in the right spot, lands with the Buffalo Bills or somebody like that, oh, man, it could get his career really could skyrocket. He could be off to a meteoric rise. But if he doesn't end up in the right place, then you can see, his career coming off to a slow start. So the question is, which one of these guys is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver? I talked about Xavier Worthy with this. When you have a receiver that's slight like Xavier Worthy, he was the 9th lightest receiver at the combine since 2000. 9th lightest. If you look at the top 50 lightest receivers in terms of body mass index at the NFL combine in its history, you only got 1,000-yard receiver among that group. Just one. Deshaun Jackson. That's it. Yeah. All right, just Deshaun Jackson. Now, remember, Devontae Smith didn't work out at the combine. He was at a pro day. So I guess you can throw him in there, too, as one of those really slight, light wide receivers. The NFL is starting to take more chances and draft those slight, small-ish wide receivers a little bit early. But, if you go look at even guys who blaze in the 40 like that, the top 25 fastest 40 times at the NFL combine in its history, there's only 1,000-yard receiver out of that group. That's it. Yeah. Santana Moss. That's it, guys. All right. So speed speed will increase your draft stock, but it does not translate to NFL productivity and production at the wide receiver position. It's like being well endowed. If there's a wow factor with it, but that just being well endowed don't make you a great lover. All right. Just because you're fast, that don't make you a great receiver. It's a wow factor, but it don't make you a great. All right. There are a lot of other subtle nuances and, things that you have to cultivate and master at that position in terms of creating separation, route running, all of those different things. So, it's really interesting. I think A.D. Mitchell is going to project to be a number one wide receiver for someone, but it's all about where he lands pretty much. Yeah. But you're right. He was unbelievable. And I'll tell you what scouts love about him too. I talked to NFL scouts and they were like, man, we like the fact he's a big game performer. He showed that at the combine. He showed out right on the big stage. 5 college football playoff games this guy's played in, scored touchdowns in all of them. He's a big game performer. And that's what you want to see. Both Texas receivers did that, man. They showed up when the pressure was mounting and had elite performances under a lot of pressure to show out. And, just like Xavier Thomas, both these guys, they like to competing at the combine. Some guys chose not to run at the combine. The NFL scouts not going to hold that against them, but they definitely give pluses to the guys who are competing at the combine. Both those receivers for Texas came to compete at the combine.
Yeah, think about that A.D. Mitchell catch against TCU to secure the game.
Oh.
I mean, just throw it up and go win, yes. Young man.
Go win.
Here's the number from that RAS score I mentioned that they've gone back and graded the total athletic performance of receivers all the way back to 1987. CJ, 87 to 2004. A.D. Mitchell's RAS score out of a possible 10 was a 9.97, ranked 11th out of 3,063 wide receivers since 1987. That's a ridiculous number. And, he's still young in the game because at Georgia, he was in a predominantly run offense that Brock Bowers was the lead target and Ladd McConkey was there. And they won with defense and running game. He came to Texas to be featured, and we saw him ball out against the Big 12 competition. It feels like the best football is coming for A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah, it certainly feels like he's far from his ceiling. When you talk about, like you said, we've yet to see him, aside from 2023, string together multiple seasons at very high competition levels. And I think there's a lot of learning still to go, a lot of technical nuance, route running ability that he's still yet to possess. But to do what he's able to do at this size with this athleticism is remarkable. And I think the number one thing that was most impressive to me was his hands. And if you go back to his drop rate, comparatively speaking to all of the top first round, second round wide receivers, he has the best. It's only 1.7% drop rate in 2023. He had the best hands of any wide receiver in that top part of the draft. And man, again, it feels like there's so much more for him to get to, which for an NFL team, if you're able to say, hey, for 1 year, like we'll work with you. But year 2, you're ready to go. I think they're going to pay off and be very, very pleased that they ended up drafting him. And I'm hopeful he goes somewhere in that 20 to 32 range because, again, I know that check might not be as big back there, but you're going to be going to a franchise with significantly better sustainability, quarterback production, and just overall winning environment right now. That's so much better than, in my eyes, going early to a team right now with no real future or bright outlook when it comes to the quarterback, the system, the offense, or the franchise in general. I would much rather see Mitchell and Worthy, for that matter, go anywhere from that 24 to 32 range.
That's the beauty and the curse of the NFL draft, because the difference between what y'all are talking about for a guy like Zay Worthy could be the Chiefs at 32 or the Panthers at 33. It could be,
exactly.
Could be that pick, right? But, oh, no.
He's like, no, exactly. Oh,
Chiefs for the Panthers. And then, of course, the Panthers would come the next day and they could trade or whatnot. But, yeah, you're like, oh, my gosh. Oh, man, I could have played with my homies. There's talk that Josh Allen, that Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. There could be one or both. I mean, who knows? They're over the cap big time. That's where I keep looking at A.D. Mitchell, thinking the Bills. at 28, because they're going to have to replace those weapons for their quarterback. AD Mitchell will be a good spot. But yeah, those kind of players, you get to that point of the draft. CJ Stroud in Houston, and at 23, Cowboys at 24, Bills at 28. Those are the spots. And even in San Francisco, where there's talk that Brandon Ayuk could be traded, and maybe the 49ers, go grab another receiver. Now you're playing in a passing offense. You guys are right. I mean, as far as your career path, who drafts you is as important as what number you're drafted, without a doubt. Moving forward, guys. Also coming out of the draft, as you've done the deep dives back in, we feel like 3 first-rounders, 2 receivers, and Byron Murphy, he's going to be one of the first defensive players drafted. I think we all feel that. What'd you think? What'd you make of the other guys who helped themselves a lot? Who do we think? We know that kind of the middle rounds are going to be where you see Jonathan Brooks and JT Sanders. Middle rounds meaning 2nd through 4th. You'll see JT and Jonathan Brooks and Tavondre Sweat and those type of Jalen Ford. Christian Jones had a good workout with the offensive lineman on Sunday. Jordan Whittington was there. What do you guys make of the other guys that worked out in Indy?
Yeah, Rod, I'll go real quick. I was just going to harp on Ryan Watts. I thought he had a tremendous day for coming in as a guy that was kind of on the fringe of going undrafted to sneaking in late in the draft. Right now, I think there's no shot he is not drafted. He will hear his name called come the back weekend of April. He had a tremendous showing, not only at the East-West Shrine game earlier in February, but again in the combine. He ran a 4.53 at 6'3", 208, broad jump, 40+ or a vertical jump of 40+ inches, a tremendous broad jump as well. Let me find it real quick. 10 and a half. And if you're doing that 6'3" as a defensive back in the NFL, someone is going to take a shot at you in the NFL draft. Someone is not going to let you get to being an undrafted free agent where anybody can lure you into their franchise. He is going to get drafted. And again, the difference between Ryan Watts and what we saw on tape at times was the quick end, top end acceleration, which was really impressive. When you talk about the 3-cone and his shuttle times, Ryan Watts had a really, really impressive day. I want to say his 10-yard get off was tremendous. It was 1.59. I want to say that's really, really quick for a guy his size, and the top end speed backed it up. So I'm all about Ryan Watts being one of the bigger winners from this weekend in terms of getting his draft stock higher on a lot of teams' boards.
Yeah, I agree with CJ on that one. It's strange because he did have good top end speed for a guy his size. He ran a 4.5, like you said, 4.53, which was just what he needs to run at 6'3". But I was surprised his shuttle, his short shuttle, he was 4th among cornerbacks. His 3-cone drill, he was 2nd among cornerbacks, which means his change of direction and short area quickness tested out really well. And that was actually something that he struggled with at Texas, deep into the routes, getting in and out of breaks, short area quickness. So he actually showed up and showed out in those drills. And I think with pretty eye-popping numbers there. I was even surprised that he was able to put up those types of numbers. And the gauntlet, which is when you run across the field and the coaches just throw footballs to you from either side and you got to turn, here, catch it, turn, here, catch it, right? The gauntlet drill. Guys, he had the top speed in the gauntlet drill out of all the corners. I don't even know how that. I'm like, what? He ran 19.8 miles per hour in the gauntlet drill, which is it's crazy. So a lot of his metrics and the kind of advanced analytics for him, it's going to force the coaches to go back to the film. They got to go like, oh, look, I got to go back to the film. Maybe I was wrong about his short area quickness and change of direction and his straightaway speed. So they're going to go back to the film. Now he's projected to be a safety, so they're not going to necessarily hold it against him at corner, because that's why they're taking his coverage liability, which he is at corner. I think he's a coverage liability. He's going to be a coverage asset when he's covering at safety, because he's going to cover tight ends and running backs. And they're going to put him down in the box because of his size. So I'm with CJ. I think Ryan Watts made himself some money. Also, the practice squads now, they've expanded them. New rules allow you to keep guys on the practice squad longer. So developmental projects like Ryan Watts with that kind of wingspan, arm length, and range, I think, you'll see a team willing to take a chance on him. I thought Keelan Robinson actually, I saw the all-combine team. NFL.com released the all-combine team. They had 3 Longhorns make it. Byron Murphy made it. Xavier Worthy made it. Nobody shocked. And Keelan Robinson made it. There were 3 guys who got honorable mentions. Christian Jones got honorable mention. AD Mitchell and JT Sanders got honorable mentions. But they were really high on Keelan Robinson. Yeah, he had the second best 10-yard split among the running backs. He was fourth in the 40-yard dash. They seem to describe him as a guy who could be a boutique complementary piece to an offense potentially. That if some team wanted him to be a specialized back who could come out of the backfield in the passing game, take advantage of linebackers that are slow, they described him in that fashion, which I was a little surprised at. He's the best kickoff returner in this class, in this draft class. If the NFL, or I should say when the NFL changed their kickoff rule from their traditional kickoff to the XFL, which everybody anticipates they're going to do. Troy Vincent saying it's going to happen potentially in March. They're going to vote on that. If they vote on that, Keelan Robinson, I don't know if he'll be drafted, but he'll be a priority free agent for a lot of teams who are going to look for kick returners that can, maximize field position, get that hidden yardage on the kickoff return. Because the XFL kickoff returns, guys, so much space. A lot of y'all hadn't watched it. Go YouTube an XFL kickoff return. Guys like Keelan Robinson will get 25, 30 yards damn near every time. And that's what the NFL wants, by the way. So that's something I think also to keep in mind with a guy like Keelan Robinson.
Hey, Rod, Ryan Watts, when you look at him, does this go back to your pressure on Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon as far as development of defensive backs? Did they maximize what they had there? When you see the freakish numbers, you're like, why didn't we see that translate to the football field all the time? I mean, that's obviously he's got the ability, and I go back to what we talked about at the start of the show and the start of the cast tonight that Terry Joseph, I mean, that's a dude. Now when you watch the combine, but he was all too often a vulnerability for Texas.
That's a great point. I actually didn't make that connection, but you just did, and I agree with you. I think you could question the coaching when you look at the metrics and the measurables from Ryan Watts. Should he have been a liability, especially getting beat deep? Oftentimes last year, I thought a lot of that was technique issues. It was about leverage issues with him too. And I mean, like I said, I was surprised that his short area quickness and change direction numbers were so good, because last year he didn't get in and out of breaks really well. And I didn't see that change of direction and that explosiveness, him getting out of breaks. If that was the case, I'd have had him, playing off sometimes, because I would have trusted him to be able to break up on some of those short, quick routes. They wanted him playing a lot of press, which he did on the boundary side. But oftentimes teams would expose him in coverage down the field, especially on deep balls. So 4.5 is plenty fast enough for a guy to be able to keep up with, faster wide receivers. But I will say at the combine, I think his 40 ended up being 26th or something like that among cornerbacks. There were 8 cornerbacks that were in the 4.3s. Cornerbacks were blazing. So I'm with you. I think that he could have been better technique wise, but ultimately they should have experimented with him at safety at Texas. Let's be honest, guys. That's what should have happened. He should have been experimented with at safety. My man Michael Griffin brought that up on Longhorn Network a couple of years ago. They should have been making that transition. The NFL shouldn't have had to step in and go, we think you're a safety. Hell, I think we all looked at Ryan Watson and went, I think he might be a pretty good safety. At one time, every Longhorn fan looked at Ryan Watson and said that, especially the way he is a force and run support. And yet I'm sure the coaches at least talked about it, and nobody thought that was the case. Once you got those young corners in, you probably should have helped him out, by the way, and increase his draft stock, so at least he had some film playing safety.
Yeah.
And by the way, your safeties weren't necessarily all-stars. They weren't all conference players. Ain't like there wasn't room for you to put another guy at safety. You rotated like 5 guys at safeties. Hell, everybody could get some reps at safety at Texas.
Yeah. They're kind of a liability and attacked in a lot of ways, depending on what the coverages were and what the team they're playing. CJ, as we get close to the top of the hour here, at least the end of the hour on our On Texas Football live stream, brought to you by Texas Electricity Ratings. Talk about them here coming up. You were talking to us in the pregame here about some Longhorns you're excited to see come winter or come spring practice that have had good runs here in the winter workouts that you've heard about. Buzz.
Yeah. Be sure if you're really looking forward to spring football starting up and getting to know what this early enrollee and freshman class can bring to the table this spring, head over to On Texas Football. I threw up two articles today, 2 primers on the offensive and defense early enrollees. Right now, again, the names that are really starting to jump out when you talk to guys around the program that are really about to have high expectations for the spring are Colin Simmons, Xavier Thomas, and Ryan Wingo. Those are the three, but there's a number of guys right behind them in terms of what they might be able to project into. Wardell Mack is one that I've heard great things about as well. A guy that really understands the game of football, is, kind of business-like when it comes to the approach. Brandon Baker is another guy on the offensive side of the ball in terms of when it comes to it being between the white lines and knowing how to flip the switch and get ready to work. He's that guy right now on the offensive line, along with Daniel Cruz. So a lot of interesting pieces right there. Parker Livingstone, Aaron Butler, the offensive side of the ball is going to be really, really special from this class, and they're hitting the ground running right now. Spring should be a lot of fun when it comes to the updates that we will have here on Texas Football and beyond.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks from today. Spring practice will start. If I have this right, the pro day is March 19th, right? The day before that Tuesday. And then they'll fire it up 2 weeks from today with spring practice. Coaches Clinic is that weekend, CJ, that follows that when Sean McVay is going to be the keynote speaker and all that. Is that the following from Wednesday? It'll be the weekend after, right?
Correct. Yep. And there will be a lot of high school coaches making the trip down to Austin again. We had Texas had Kyle Shanahan last year, Sean McVay this year. You see where Steve Sarkisian heads to when it comes to new coaching ideas and guys that he relies on, that West Coast offense that we've seen so successful in the NFL. We see his wrinkles, obviously, in college football as well, Rod, with the pony package and number of different looks that we've seen throughout the season. So should be a lot of busy movement in the months of March and April. A lot of folks coming to Austin. And also don't forget about the Texas Relays later in the spring, which will be coming to Austin again. So a lot going on right now, and a lot of folks coming in and out of Austin to visit Texas, to see the campus, to see practice, and again, experience the city.
Yeah, I can't wait to see if Sark brings in for his next coaching clinic, because he's had my man Kyle Shanahan, Dan Quinn, and Sean McVay. They've been his coaching clinic folks for the 3 coaching clinics he's had. He leans heavily toward that next Shanahan coaching franchise. I think he's going to bring in LaFleur. I mean, bring in Mike McDaniel. Like, don't stop bringing in them Shanahan guys. I think he's just bringing them in so he can pick their brain. And I salute you, Sark. Brilliant move, because they get that. Yeah, they can talk to all the coaches at the coaching clinic, but Sark knows he's gonna get them for a couple of hours, just him and them talking ball, and that's all you need if you're a coach. You can break out, hey man, I've been thinking about these plays, man. I saw you doing some stuff. You can look at this for me, and boom, they'll check it out. Drop a couple of tidbits on them, a couple of nuggets, and then Sark can just roll out something new. So I think there's a selfish part of Sark, because he's admitted, I love that Shanahan coaching tree, that he follows it and he steals plays from it. I think a lot of them he's just doing it to bring in guys that are going to help him kind of advance his knowledge of that particular coaching tree.
Sean McVay this time around, and LaFleur would make a lot of sense without a doubt for the Longhorns. And of course, high school coaches love flocking in and hearing from those guys. I mean, they're trying to steal. They're trying to steal nuggets as well, and some of the biggest names in all of football. Some of those the top innovators.
He should bring in McDaniel, because McDaniel had the fastest offense in the NFL. He's got arguably one of the fastest. He had arguably the fastest offense in college football this past year. Yeah, based off Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell's 40 times, and then you got Jaden Blue in the backfield and Keelan Robinson. You had arguably the fastest offense in college football. Bring in Mike McDaniel; he'll tell you how to maximize and weaponize all that speed. Sark knows how to do it, but that matching of the minds right there could be really impressive. You can inspire something new with Sark in that group.
100%. I did see the question that was asked at Combine of the coaches, which current NFL coach would run the fastest 40? Did you see that? That question. I think they all said, Kevin O'Connell, who ran a 4.6 when he was coming out of San Diego State as a quarterback. He was 4.6 something at Michigan, but they all said McVay. McVay would probably win that. McVay would probably be the guy who goes the fastest coach 40. Hey, we got some super chats here on the On Texas Football Texas Electricity Ratings live stream on a Tuesday night. Let's get them on. Thank you. Appreciate that. What Texas men's sports program, men's basketball or men's baseball, will have a new coach by 2026?
Oh, wow.
Ooh, that's a deep one.
Wow. Which one's more likely?
More likely.
I think we know which one. Texas men's basketball is more likely. I don't know if either one happens, but that's probably the most likely. But I will say, Texas baseball will have a new challenge in the SEC. I'm not sure Texas basketball is going to have to step up their play going to the SEC. Texas baseball gonna have to. I mean, that's just it's a different level of play. And Texas football will have to going to the SEC. I don't know if SEC basketball is tougher than the Big 12.
No, it's not. I mean, what do they got? 4 or 5 teams? I mean, the Big 12 has 8, 9 teams. It's a gauntlet. I mean, I don't want to say there are nights off in the SEC, CJ, in basketball, but there are some easier opportunities in the SEC than you'd get on a night-by-night basis, with Rodney Terry, and he's only in year 1 of his first contract with David Pierce. Thoughts on that? I mean, Rod's right about the gauntlet of the SEC once you get there.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. And Rod, I thought that was a really good point. For baseball specifically, I know that weekend down in Houston didn't go too well for the Longhorns. No. But this has kind of been the MO of every Texas team that we've seen under David Pierce. They go and they get tested, and early in the season, you normally don't see the results that you want to see on the field through the first 2 or 3 weeks. That's just how it is. This team normally finds its groove midway through conference play when it looks like things are getting really bleak. They flip a switch and they figure it out. That's kind of been the MO and the identity of this team each year that David Pierce has been here, with the exception of, well, I think 2019 when they missed the entire Big 12 tournament. That was the year I actually covered baseball for the Daily Texan when I was at school. So that wasn't a fun year, but this is just what this program does. It feels like, they're not necessarily built out of the gate to go up and compete with the best teams in the country. And that's okay, because you know what? You don't make an Omaha appearance in March 5th. You are in that position. He's made it 3 times out of 6 years. And last year he was a pop-up away from making it again. So I have no doubts that David Pierce is a good coach. I have no doubts that he is the guy for Texas long-term. It's all about getting the next step for David Pierce and the Texas program, and that's more work out of the portal, and that's development in the back end of your rotation and into your bullpen. That's where you're going to make your money and get to that next step in the SEC to continue to compete at the very top.
But I would say the SEC is doing a better job. Those schools, A&M included, they're playing right now. It's 3-1 A&M in the 5th. And they've got some traffic on the bases right now. The baseball in the NIL is doing more NIL than Texas is right now. I mean, LSU, Texas A&M has invested heavily in their NIL and baseball. That's going to have to be a push. I think for Rodney Terry, it's he took the team almost to the Final Four last year, and so you had to give him a contract and let him come back. This roster seems to have some flaws, and now you got a Dylan DeSue question and injury situation, but at the same time, I think it lightens for Rodney Terry when he gets there as far as the grind of the conference. But as far as 2026, I think they'll both be the head coach in 2026. That's what I would say. Yeah, based on the record of CDC wants you to compete. Here we go. Rod and CJ with spring ball 2 weeks away. What are some things y'all want to see and think y'all don't want to see? Okay, I would say injuries. Injuries is always what you don't want to see. I'll be an easy guy with injuries. Thank you, Justin. 2 weeks away, guys. What do you want to see and think y'all don't want to see?
That's good. What I want to see, I'd like to see pressure from the edges. I'd like to see those guys making splash plays off the edge. That's something, Texas has now a natural pass rusher on the edge. Well, multiple natural pass rushers on the edge. You would bring in a young Colin Simmons. He's got natural pass rushing, edge rushing ability. You bring in Trey Moore via the transfer portal. That's a guy that naturally knows how to rush the passer. You haven't had that really. And I expect improvement from Ethan Burke. I expect improvement from Barron Sorrell. So that's what I want to see. I want to see those edges collapse in that pocket. Now in spring, you can't touch the quarterback, can't get close to the quarterback. But you can tell if guys are collapsing that pocket. You can tell if guys are able to get around that edge. And that's what I want to see, because we haven't had that. That pressure from Texas has been coming up the gut from the interior, from the guts of the defense, which nothing wrong with that, with Devondre Sweat and with, Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy, I saw his pressure rate from on 3rd and 4th down was like 25%. Like he was just freakish in terms of his pressure rate, and that was far and away the best number for an interior defensive lineman in college football. You're going to be missing that, but I think Texas will be able to compensate for that loss by bringing that pressure off the edge. So I want to see that, and I want to see the secondary, man. I want to see the secondary actually lock guys down. I'd like to see them making more plays on the football, but I'd like to see them become a strength of the defense. I think this defense is going to be built from the outside in, from the secondary and from the edges. I think the central nervous system and maybe the guts of the defense may be playing catch up. until they, figure out who's going to be the other off-ball linebacker, who's going to be the rotation of interior defensive linemen you're going to have. Right now, they don't know that. We have way more answers than questions on the edges and in the secondary, way more questions than answers in the interior defensive line and the linebacking core, right up the guts of that central nervous system.
Yeah, I really want to see these running backs get loose. You talk about CJ Baxter, Jaden Blue, the newcomers. Where does Trey Wisner fit? Savion Red. There's a lot of pieces right there, and a lot of them have a lot of talent and breakaway speed. The key for me, though, is that offensive line has got to be very, very good in spring ball. That has to be the number one piece that we hear dominance from on either side of the ball from a position group in my eyes. They're going against a team or in opposition on the defensive side of the ball in the trenches where, again, that's been the biggest question mark. We don't yet know if they're going to be ready to go into the SEC, so it's going to be a great test for them. But returning 4 out of 5 and having a piece to fill in at that right tackle spot with a start against a top 25 team already under his belt, that offensive line needs to be coming out cooking for me to feel really comfortable about the spring, and I think they will. I think the running game is going to be very, very talented. A lot of production this year, and I think Quinn Ewers, more times than not, will have a clean jersey when it comes to the pass protection side of things.
We won't see it in spring, guys, but the kick return game should be magnificent.
Wow.
It should be. It really should be, man. I mean, you got Matthew Golden, who is just he's an upgrade over Keelan Robinson, who was one of the better kickoff returners in the country, best kickoff returner in the draft class. Matthew Golden is actually an upgrade. And that's not an insult to Keelan Robinson. That's how good Matthew Golden is at it. Silas Bowden is the guy that's returned punts at Oregon State. I don't know if he's going to be your punt returner. We don't know. I don't actually know who's going to be the punt returner. I imagine, Jeff Banks has got someone in mind. Remember, Xavier Worthy is one of the best punt returners in the country. We don't talk about that enough when we talk about Xavier Worthy. I don't even know if he'll be doing that in the NFL. I mean, think about it. He didn't do it in high school either. Xavier Worthy never returned punts in high school. Literally, Jeff Banks got him and was like, yeah, man, we like your explosivity. We like your speed. I need that speed on special teams in the return game. So you are returning punts. And he wanted someone who had hands to secure the punt first and somebody who's fearless. That's going to be the question. Who's going to be the punt returner? You got plenty of guys that can do it, who got great skill and speed. But I wonder who Jeff Banks is going to decide he trusts back there in the return game.
Yep. Trust is big for Jeff Banks. You got to be able to catch the ball first. That's why you didn't see Deshaun Jameson back there every punt back at the end of his career. Couldn't trust him feel the punt. Can trust him to follow the blocks. That was the biggest issue for him. But yeah, I'm right there with you, Rod. It'll be interesting between Silas Bolden, Jonte Cook, even Matthew Golden, a lot of pieces.
Jaden Blue gonna be back there too. Oh 100%. Man.
Well, now it's gonna be interesting because the word that comes to me for spring practice is competition. Sark talked about it back in January at the press conference, or maybe it was February. We just talked about they're gonna have so much depth, right? They got so many new players and so many returning players that for the first time since he's been here, they're gonna get to have real competition and really get a lot of reps. Like he talked about having 2 fields going with 1s and 3s and 2s and 4s and really, and Rod, when you were playing at Texas when it got deep. And, you guys were going mano a mano, practice after practice. That's, what improves a player and what improves an athlete is depth, is reps and working at it and working against good players. We go back to just a couple of years ago where Texas couldn't even field an offensive line for their spring practice and spring games. Sark has talked about we should have, 15 offensive linemen. We should be able to go and split fields and really get a lot of work in over, a month period.
No, I totally agree. That's the iron sharpens iron, right? I mean, you could argue that Sark hadn't stacked the roster enough yet. He hadn't had enough talent acquisition cycles. Now, with the transfer portal, that's easier to do. But he hadn't got a chance to stack the roster like Mac had stacked it by the time, I think that year I left, like that 03 was, I left. I bet by 03, they had that roster stacked. There were NFL guys, first round picks starting, and you had some first round picks behind them, right? Those guys were backing them up. And I remember when Texas did that, and it was starting to get there in 2001. Maybe you had your Roy Williams at wide receiver class, Roy Williams, B.J. Johnson, Sloan Thomas. I remember the DB room, and it started getting stacked with those young dogs, like young wolves, like Michael Huff and Cedric Griffin. I remember looking at them dudes like, man, them dudes gonna be way better than me. They're not taking my job, but them dudes gonna be better than I am. And then you get to the point where the iron sharpens iron. And that's when I'm so glad that Mac Brown, stacked that wide receiver room because I needed it. I needed to go up against Roy Williams every day. I needed to go up against B.J. Johnson every day. I needed an NFL wide receiver to compete with every day, and I took advantage of it. I remember kicking young DBs to the side like, nah, man, I'm covering Roy Williams. You don't get a Roy Williams rep. I get the Roy Williams reps around here. All right. I want to go up against an NFL guy every time. All right. Because I want to make sure that I cultivate my craft and I want to refine my craft up against the best. So I knew Roy Williams was going to be a first round wide receiver. I went to the Detroit Lions and told them, you need to draft Roy Williams because he's better than the other guy you just drafted in the first round. Draft that guy. So I think that's where you want to get to, whether you're at the point where the practices theoretically are tougher than the games because you're going up against more talent than you would face in a week-to-week competition in the Big 12. Now, SEC, that'll be different. But for the most part, in the Big 12, Texas practices when they had the roster stacked were tougher than the games, except for Oklahoma. Maybe you had a big non-conference game, whatever that may be, or hopefully you went to a big-time bowl game. But other than that, 3 or 4 times a year, you may play a team that had like talent as yours, but for the most part, the practices, you got to make sure the competition level is really, really high, and you want NFL players competing against NFL players at every level. Like you said, on that practice field, you got the ones versus twos over here, twos versus ones over here, but it don't matter because the twos are in a future NFL guys. The ones will be going out next year in the NFL draft, and it's just iron sharpening iron, man. I remember when Texas got to that point, and we were winning 11 games. And then those guys took it to an even higher level when I left in 03 and 04, and then finally in 05 winning national title. That's the way you do it. I think you can expedite that process now because you got the transfer portal, you got NIL, but I think Sark might be at that place in year 4, considering what we're about to watch in the draft.
All right, guys, I want to tell you about that's great stuff there, Rod B. I want to tell you about Texas Electricity ratings here. Bring you the Tuesday live stream for those who live in Texas, of course, here in the Lone Star State, the great state, and major cities with deregulated electricity like Dallas and Houston. You understand that the deregulated electricity market can be confusing. TER, Texas Electricity Rating, is a shopping website. Lets you compare prices, read customer reviews, and find good electricity that fits your needs. It also filters out a lot of the gimmicky plans on websites like Power to Choose that you trick you as a customer into expensive bills. Don't follow that model. So if you're in the market for a new electricity plan, shop TexasElectricityRatings.com. Make sure you put /OTF on Texas football, OTF at the end for all of your electricity needs, and hook them. Huge Texas fans, and obviously electricity important, especially when it's 90 degrees today in Austin, Texas. This is Tell Them Again, Roderick. Yeah, Rod. I remember when Rod went from Roderick Babers to Rod. It just kind of happened out of the blue, right? All of a sudden,
it did. I never did that, guys. I never requested it. Honestly, it's either John Bianca did it or Mac Brown did it. I'm not sure. Oh, Craig Way. Craig Way could have been responsible for that too. They shortened it. My mom used to ask me, why you let them call you Rod? I was like, Mom, I didn't do anything. It's the white people. They did it. They started calling me Rod. Never blame me. All right, go talk to John Bianca or Mac Brown or Craig Way. But honestly, now I'm still Rod. So honestly, I have to thank them. I owe them a debt of gratitude because I think Rod takes me farther than Roderick would have taken me. I don't know where I'd be if I was still Roderick. Rod's good. Yeah, I like that.
It's taking you good place. Hey, can we get one more super chat and then we'll wrap this thing up on a Tuesday night? Brought to you by Texas Electricity Ratings. We have one more super chat, I believe, according to Matthew. Maybe not. All right. Ooh. Then I think we're good. Good. Guys, good stuff. We'll be, CJ, looking for that deep dive article about NFL drafts and 3 players in the first round. I mean, Ohio State with 12, that's a huge number. They've been a factory. Longhorns trying to get there. Rod, great stuff as always. Thanks to everybody with the super chats. Thank you to Matthew. Thank you to everybody. We're watching this Texas baseball game. Looks like it's going to be a tough and tight one all the way to the final out here at UFC Dish-Falk Field. Looks like a good ball game. So go check that out. Certainly be talking about it into the next couple of days without a doubt. Thank you, Arch Horn. Appreciate you there. Pray we love you too. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you, Texas Electricity Ratings. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, CJ. Have a great night, y'all.
Hook 'em.
Y'all hook 'em.